Okay, well, good to see everybody here this evening. I am about to pull up my special guest for the evening, talking with Justin Campbell. So, Justin, I'm going to get you here on screen, hopefully. Yeah, there we go.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm on my nice fake green screen background, so had to get the house cleaned up for you guys, right? Okay, yeah, we got some people saying hello. Good to see everybody. So for tonight's topic, we've gotten a variety of questions in, and I think a very important question several people are interested in, how do we make sure we're passing on our faith to the next generation? So I think that's a very important topic, and it seemed obvious to me that that'd be a great fit to include Justin on, because this is not just a passion of his, but this is really his vocation. I mean, he feels a strong sense of calling to reaching the next generation. And so, Justin, I guess you and I have talked a little bit about some directions we wanted to kind of go with the conversation tonight. And so my suggestion, there's my brother-in-law. Hello, Travis.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so my suggestion was we go ahead and start with some scriptures. And so hopefully I'm about to go to a different scene, and I'm hoping that everyone can still hear Justin. If you can't, let me know. But Justin, I'm going to start with one scripture that has been significant to me, and then I'm going to invite you to share some that have been important to you. But lots of people weighing in. Good to see everybody. My suggestion would be for any of you, when you think about trying to rear children up in the Lord, I want to invite you to go ahead and post here in the comments, post what verses have been really important to you. We'll try to take a look at a few of those. So Justin and I will go first, but I'll be looking forward to seeing what you put in the comments. Jana, sorry, Joaquin is just eating and he is taking a nap right now. So he will probably pass on this one tonight. All right, good to see everybody rolling in. So I'm going to go over here to another window where I can show you all some scriptures. There we go. I think you can see that okay. Justin, can everybody hear Justin? Talk, Justin. No? Okay.
I'm talking. Do you want me to say something?
Yeah.
Like important?
Yeah, can people hear Justin? Can y'all hear Justin?
I can say, very grateful for everybody being here. This opportunity is very exciting.
Okay.
Can they hear me?
I don't know. So, Justin, I'm just going to do my verse real quick, and I'll let you read your verses when I go back to you. I can hear you. I don't know if they can or not. So this verse was important to me when I was in youth ministry, Matthew chapter 11, verses 17 to 19. And in some ways, this might be an unexpected verse. Oh, you can hear him. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, Letty says that she can hear. So, okay, good. So in that case, I'll try to look up your scriptures as we go, Justin, so everybody can read along. So Matthew chapter 11, this became important to me when I was early in my youth ministry career, when we were at some event and some of the older teens who hadn't quite warmed up to me yet, one of them just decided to invite me to do some stupid little dance or something that was kind of the trend at the time. And of course, I didn't have a clue how to do it. I had to get them to teach me how to do it. And but just the same, I decided to be kind of a good sport and try to go along with it. And it was kind of a moment when I noticed they really started connecting with me. And so I was drawing on this passage here when I was thinking about that approach. This is Jesus talking, and he's comparing and contrasting his ministry with that of John the Baptist. And what he says is, "We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge," that's a funeral song, "and you did not mourn." And his application of that is, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her deeds." And so my application of that text is that it's really easy as an adult, when you are a few years past your teenage years, and you see someone who's an adolescent who's just really upset about something, sometimes that thing they're upset about, because of your experience in life, to be kind of a trivial thing. Like, they're going to get past this. It's not really that big of a deal. They shouldn't be making such a big deal of it. But one of the things we have to remember is that when they're in the moment, they don't have your years of life experience. They don't have the hindsight. They don't have the situation in life that you do. And it's better to just try and go there with them. So when they feel like in their life they're experiencing something that's really sad and hard for them, I'll get a lot better result with them in every situation by trying to at least be empathetic and sympathetic
Yeah.
than I will by just
Absolutely.
saying, "Oh, you're just being a stupid teenager. One year you'll understand one of these days." Like it doesn't help. So when they're hurting, you
Right.
try to go there with them, and when they're really rejoicing, if it's something I can find a way to rejoice about, I should try to be a team player and try to support them. So
Right.
that for me has been one verse I thought about a lot when I was in youth ministry. In any given moment, whether or not I always felt like it, I try to ask myself the question, like, what kind of presence do I need to have with these kids right now? And how do they know that I'm in their corner? Even if this issue is not my issue, they matter to me either way. So this was a verse that I was passionate about. So Justin, I'm going to toss it to you. And I'm sorry, I'm going to I must decrease and he must increase. I'm going to make myself a little smaller on the screen here. And Justin, what is a couple of verses you would have us think about as we think about raising the next generation?
Yeah. So I guess two things I want to say before I dive into that. First of all, it really is good to sit down and have this hour, set aside to talk about Generation Z and talk about ministering to them and participating in the faith with them, because they are so different from boomers and everybody else, and from millennials. We're all very different. And so to spend this time, I'm very encouraged by that. So thank you for setting up this time.
Sure.
And then secondly, with what you just said, we're going to talk about it later, but just going there with them, right? I think that goes not only with Generation Z, but people, the ministry of presence is so impactful, and that's not just physical, but also emotional. You're sad, I'm going to go there with you. I'm going to travel with you because we're in this together. So I really like that. Thank you for that. So the verses I want to talk about first is Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 12 and 13. I'll be reading from the NIV. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the aliens living in your towns, so they can listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. Their children, who do not know this law, must hear it and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. I like this because the Israelites, they've been set free. Wandered for almost all of their 40 years at this point, and they're about to go into this promised land that is inhabited by other people. And so you can
Justin, my apologies. I was trying to cancel out your echo, and right now I can hear nothing. So I'm going to, right now I've just lost everything. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, no sound. Okay, I can't hear it either. So my computer is with me. So what I'm going to do, guys, I know this is a pain. I'm going to exit this and pull it right back up.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Now I can hear you.
Okay. And you sound clearer too now.
Good. Can y'all hear him now? I was getting the spinning rainbow of death there for a couple of minutes, so I've been over here trying to massage it back into life. So,
can they hear me?
Can y'all hear Justin?
Oh.
Okay. Travis is saying yes. Good.
All right. Well, if Travis can hear me, I'm happy.
Okay, good. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Unfortunately, I've got like a 6-year-old laptop, and I'm doing this from a spare bedroom in my house. So this is kind of the best we can do. Yeah. So I'm a little low now. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at my own microphone. Yeah, I think I'm about as loud as I can get. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, that's the downside of this kind of approach is that sometimes you have technical difficulties. So pre-recorded stuff is easier because you can iron all that out. But live stuff, you're dependent on a lot of different factors to work. So good. Okay. Well,
How far back do you want me to go?
yeah. Well, let's just move on to your next passage so we can keep things going. Yeah.
Sure. I like it. All right. So moving off of Deuteronomy, going to Psalm chapter 71, verse 18, again from the NIV. Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, O God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your might to all who are to come. I like this as it talks about, just don't forsake me until I've done this. This is super important to me, and that one thing is declaring His might to the next generation, right? Declaring God's might and what God's done. Because if anybody can talk about a journey with faith, it's probably David. And so I really like that he's like, there's just one thing I have to accomplish, and it's passing this on so that this continues to be told.
Yeah, that's a great passage to think about. That passing on the faith is not just like a semi-desirable goal, but it's like an urgent goal to center your life around. Like there's not much you can think of that matters more than this.
Right, absolutely. Especially, I just think it's so cool to hear David say that. We're not here to do a character analysis, but knowing David's life story, when it comes to thinking of his children, I think there's a lot of implications on that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then moving to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. This is a verse that, I'm sure a lot of us already know, especially a lot of our students already know. But going ahead and reading it in the NIV. Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in life, in love, in faith, and in purity. I didn't want this talk to turn into everything that the older generation, us included, should do to the younger. I wanted, it's a two-way street, right? And so while it is important for us and for parents of students and everybody else to pass on the faith, it's important for the younger generation, for Generation Z, to set an example and to live according to that. We're allowed to call them into something higher, and they're allowed to pull us into something as well, because they've got. If they're learning what we've taught them, they're also learning new stuff then, because they've, they're going to teach the continuation of the faith. And so I just think I wanted to put both sides of the coin, I guess.
That's helpful, Justin. I'm thinking about how, right now, our best missionaries to Generation Z are the members of Generation Z that go to our church, right? It's the ones that bring their friends and invite their friends or talk about their faith or own their faith publicly. Yeah, it's really easy to try and think of people in their adolescent years like they're in some sort of cocoon where they don't have to really start adulting until they're adults. And it's like, no, you need to be well prepared and grounded as a Christian by the time you get out of high school, not just once you finish and start trying to sort your life out in college. So yeah, I like that. I like that passage you're bringing in, Justin, the importance of even the younger ones already setting the example and recognizing that there's not like a certain age threshold you have to wait until you're allowed to start doing anything good for the kingdom.
Right. Yeah. One of the things about American culture, right? Like we don't have a becoming an adult ceremony, which is a negative, and I think in a lot of ways, but it also is like, at any time I can expect you to be an adult Christian, start doing it now, like it's okay to be loving and start transitioning that into inviting and all these other things.
Yeah. Good. Now I'm looking. We're getting a few amens on here. Glad it sounds like everybody can hear everybody now. I'm just looking back to see if anybody's posted any extra scriptures we wanted to look at.
Sure.
I don't think so. So, Justin, let's keep moving. I thought it would be good since Justin has spent so much time thinking about Generation Z. Justin, why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of the strengths and traits of this generation, some of the things that would be typical of this generation. When we're getting to know Generation Z, which is the generation you're ministering to, in fact, you're kind of borderline millennial Generation Z yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, so like most people say millennial ends like at 1995, and I was born in 94.
Yeah.
So I really am just, right on the precipice. And so in a lot of ways I relate to them. I know where they're coming from in a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I guess this is a good segue. One of the main differences is I have some brief memories of 9/11.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the huge things is that most Generation Z is kind of born in a post 9/11 world.
Right.
Because if you're thinking of Generation Z, I guess for the sake of just conversation, right, it's 96 to like 2012. It's kind of what I've seen. Is that the same you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got their own figures,
Sure, of course. So you're looking at basically sophomores in college down.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I've been thinking of. So anyway, just thinking through, there are people that were born post 9/11. And so we kind of have our economic spike, shortly after 9/11, and then kind of down, and not like in a bad way or anything, but kind of just a stabilizing, slight recession. They're seeing all of their family in college debt, which is a huge deal, and thinking about what they're going to do after high school, thinking of their plans forward. Honestly, I'm very, just anxious, I guess is a good word, to see what next level education looks like for a lot of Generation Z, with how much student debt their parents are still paying off. I say we, because I'm still paying mine off. And then school shootings is a huge thing. We all know about it. Our kid, I never once did a school shooting drill. That never happened to me. But all these kids are like, yeah, we know exactly what to do. We know what their plan is anyway. They practice it every now and then, which I think is just it's so scary. And it is so different from anything any of us have ever experienced. School is not a safe haven, by any stretch of the imagination anymore.
Not to interrupt you, but I saw somebody had tweeted today. This lady was talking to her daughter, and she said, having a conversation with my daughter, and my daughter said, well, the good thing about being quarantined at home for the next 3 weeks at least is that I don't have to worry about any school shootings.
Wow.
Like that was one of her first thoughts. Like that's become such an active part of this generation's almost expectation for what could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes me emotional. That's really sad to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very defining trait, to think about. And then I think one of the huge things that we don't give a lot of wind to usually is that there's these deep social divides, and they've never been more accessible. Right. So I think, whether you're Republican or Democrat, or however you feel about all these different things, right? It's weather change, climate change, abortion status, all these things, right? There's all these conversation points, and they can see it on their phone, and all this information that's trying to tribalize people and put them into corners when they're so young, they're still being formed. And so they're trying to make decisions that they feel, okay, once I decide this also means this, and this about me, and I have to subscribe to that. And they start putting themselves in pigeonholes rather than experiencing the freedom of growing. That is, the most foundational part of adolescence.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. The way that now it's kind of expected, like you say, when I'm going to hold position A and it aligns with this political party, I must therefore hold all these additional positions as well. And also this thing where we beat everyone up who's ever publicly changed their mind about something. Since when is it a bad thing to change your mind if you get better information? I love being able to, because to me that's what growth is, right?
Absolutely.
I've learned more, I've experienced more, so I see things differently. I'll change my position. We publicly see people get raked over the coals all the time for flip flopping or whatever we want to call it. And
and cancel culture. If you're aware of that, it's just been one of the worst things about culture today. And it's for example, my cousin just started dating a guy, and she's in college, and she went over and met his family. And the first question they asked him was, they asked her, "Are you a Christian?" Great. That's fine that they asked her that. Second question, "Are you Republican?" I'm just like, man, they're just trying to pigeonhole her down. I think we've all kind of subscribed to this a little bit. It's like, it'd be nice if I can know these things about you, rather than letting the person be the person, right? And they asked her other questions, and I think it's just better to let people experience growth. She's 19. Let's let her experience, this is her first time living away from home, as she's exposed to new ideas,
I'm throwing a quote up here right now from Kathy. Kathy says, growth is listening to other viewpoints. I think that's a word well said, Kathy. Yeah.
Right.
You got to be able to listen to other people to grow. Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So, you're talking a little bit about some of just the general traits about Generation Z. And, people always love to kind of speak poorly of the generation that's not their own. But there are some real strengths that Generation Z seems to possess in kind of a stereotypical fashion. And so when you were to speak of Generation Z as a group, what would you say some of their strengths are?
Yeah, like you said, Ian, this is painting with a broad brush, but they're self-learners, which is really cool. I think that's valued by pre-millennials, and they're like, well, learn for yourself. Well, Generation Z is terrific at this, and that's mainly because of YouTube.
Yep.
The accessibility to have like every time I've ever worked on a car at all, I go to my dad first and YouTube second.
Hmm.
Um, and then, online information in general. There's just so much out there. Anything you want to know, somebody at least has an opinion piece about it, and so they've learned how to look that up first.
Hmm.
And then the third one is, I think, more of a negative, on why they are self-learners. But millennials have done a great job of distancing themselves for parenting. Very much just sit down and watch these YouTube videos that you love so much while I go and do something else and go
Mm.
get something accomplished. And that's
Yeah.
not good. That is a negative,
Yeah.
but it's the reality for a lot of these kids. And so, of course, they're self-learners. They were self-growers in a lot of ways. They felt isolated.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna continue to see that a little bit for a little bit longer,
Mhm.
but the self-learner I can do this on my own. I don't necessarily need your help, and if I do need help, I've got other resources besides you that I can go to.
Mm.
I think it's really good. I think that's really cool, and it's going to provide a lot of opportunities going forward of what they're going to create and the things that they're going to, like, you can take a YouTube video and you learn how to do something like, well, that's cool, but I also watch this other YouTube video that can compound on that and make this, however
Mhm.
much better. And I think that's really exciting and really cool to look forward to the future. And then I guess that's a great segue, actually, using that same little hand gesture to look at. They are very I can't say that word.
Entrepreneurial. Yeah.
Entrepreneurial.
There
Yeah.
you go.
When you think about Generation Z, there's a lot of things in this world that they look at and they're like, this isn't necessarily the way that I wish it was. And we'll get into a lot of those in a little bit, but there's a lot of things in this world that they wish was a little bit better. And you're saying that they want to fix them. They're doing
Yeah.
things to fix them. They're very involved in society. They're very involved in culture. They're already very culturally aware. They have a very high political understanding.
Mhm.
And so, like, I think they're very interested in making things better, which is going to be great for the next generation, whatever you call. I don't know if they're called AA or what,
Who knows?
but post Generation Z. I think that's going to be very exciting because I truly believe they'll be stepping into a better world than the world that we're living in today.
Good.
Yeah, and the third thing I wanted to bring up is they're extremely empathetic. This is really cool. These adolescents and these children they're very concerned with your well-being, the proverbial you. Every child or adolescent has been affected by mental illness, whether it's themselves or someone they know. Mental illness is just rampant in Generation Z, and so because of that, they're careful to talk poorly about somebody, because what if that person is experiencing depression or that person is suicidal? They're careful about that, and they're very considerate to talk about anything. Like, I'm going to hear your point of view because I know it matters a lot to you, and I don't know what you're going through. When the expectation is you probably have mental illness, it makes you very, very gentle, I think, is a good word, and empathetic. And I think that's a really positive trait, to always be considering the walk of the other person.
Yeah.
I think that's a very positive trait. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So one of the other things, Justin, I know we wanted to talk about, there was some research done really several years ago that seems to still be pretty much on target in describing a generation. And we have a few people who are adding some comments here. Linda's mentioning they seem to have a good level of confidence in their abilities, things that they can do. Kathy's kind of affirming, they really do seem to be, empathetic people. They're competent people. They're willing to be self-starters. So there's a lot of good things about the younger generation. So important not to just only speak poorly of them because they might be different than my generation, right? But there's a study that was done several years ago that came up with this concept, moralistic therapeutic deism. And so Justin sent me a couple of notes ahead of time. So Justin, while we're talking, I'm going to just have your bullet points on the screen, okay? And invite you to kind of comment on these. If I can find my overlay.
Yeah. Well, while you do that, I'll kind of, obviously moralistic just means something attaining to morals, right? And so just kind of the way you live, the kind of the laws you live by, I guess is a way to put that. Therapeutic, anything that provides a therapy feeling, something that makes you feel good. And then deism would be like, de is like the Greek word for God, or Latin word for God, and it's like deism is kind of like a view of God. So you have this moralistic, a moral founded feel good thing about God. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And generally, when we would use deism, deism is a way of kind of avoiding a real personal notion of God, right? So as
Right.
Christians, we would talk about Jehovah God or Yahweh or some of the more personal iterations of God. This is more like some of the deism that was so popular around the founding of our country, where God is a
Right.
little bit more of the guy who wound up the universe, but we don't really know him personally so much, right?
Right. Yeah, that's well said.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes into point one. So like, there's 5 major points of moralistic therapeutic deism. This is actually coined in 2005. And so as we go through this, it's going to sound like it was written an hour ago.
Yeah.
You're going to hear this and like, wow, that is overwhelmingly true. But check this out. So number one is that God exists. A God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. Point two is God wants people to be. We'll go point by point. So like the first one, God exists who created and ordered the world. Like you said, it makes God so distant.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like a guy that just kind of, like you said, wound the clock and then it's just letting it do its thing. Or like I used to have a Hot Wheels track, right? And I would hold it on the charger and I'd let it go and they'd be like ramped up and they would just go around the track until they couldn't anymore. But all right, and that's not our God. Our God is very present, very active in our lives. He's not just setting a clock and then sitting back. He's very. That's why we pray, right? It's like God is very involved in the lives of everything, of the whole entire cosmos.
Yeah.
Point number 2 is that God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. So obviously, the first half of that is the moralistic part, right? It's focusing on the morals. Be a good person. Be charitable. Be nice to people. You probably shouldn't just do that. You probably shouldn't steal. Don't steal. This kind of just generic good morals that are present in most social structures and most religions, like it says. But that second half, I think, is very crucial, where it says, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions.
Right.
You get this very kind of, I'm not subscribing to one faith. It's
spiritual but not religious, right? I like the idea of the
right.
spiritual, but I don't want to sign up for any particular version of it.
Right. Yeah. The period, ideally would be as taught in the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's the reality that this therapeutic deism is found with that little additive at the end. Point 3 is the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. Man, this one's tough, because I feel it as a borderline millennial Generation Z. It's very individualistic. And I think this kind of draws a parallel back to the overwhelming empathy, is that sometimes Generation Z can lack the ability to say, you are wrong.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm happy. You're doing something that makes you happy, and that's great for you. I'm glad you're experiencing happiness, which is the most fleeting feeling in the world.
Right.
Right? You're happy until anything can happen. You trip a little bit. I'm not so happy anymore. It's the most fleeting feeling you can have.
Yeah.
And so to just seek out happiness in all things. I think it's very shallow. It's very temporary, and it's very individualistic. There's no culpability in that. Well, I was seeking my happiness. I'm sorry that I kind of hurt you in that. I think that it can lead down all those kind of roads.
Right. Right.
Point 4 is God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. I've heard this called like vending machine God, right?
Yeah.
Vending machine. No one pays much mind to it until you're really thirsty and you got a buck. So, time to get a Dr. Pepper. You slide in, you get your Dr. Pepper, and you move on. And then when you need another Dr. Pepper, you go back, right? And I think oftentimes our prayer can be like that, man. Everything's great. Why would I pray? Things are going well. Why would I pray? Oh no. Tragedy has struck. Something is going on in the world that I need to pray about, rather than acknowledging that God is sustaining all things. He is inside of you at all times, which is the most comforting thing about God, right? It's like I said earlier, He's with you in the desert. He's before you cross over into this promised land. He's with you in the highs and the lows, and to have that ongoing relationship with Him is one of the foundational parts of Christianity.
Right.
So if you subscribe to moralistic therapeutic deism subconsciously, which most of Generation Z does, they're missing that. They don't have a consistent prayer life. They're not, reading the Bible and studying, and they're missing out on that discipleship and that relationship.
Right. Right.
And then here it is. This is like the main problem with moralistic therapeutic deism is number 5 is good people go to heaven when they die. Man, that is a tough one, and it's tough to minister. That is something that I'm not going to say I see it in our kids at King's Crossing, but I'll say it. I saw it at the other 2 places I did full-time youth ministry at. Take that as you want, right? But to say that, it just do good things. I've heard people say that every faith, whether it's Hinduism or Islam or whatever, is a different expression of God.
Right.
And that can't be further from the truth. And I'm not talking trash on any other religion, but if you're going to say you are a Christian, you have to believe in Jesus.
Right.
You have to believe the words that he said, where he said, "No one goes to the Father except through me."
Right.
You have to look at Paul, and all of his talk about, don't go on sinning, like live a life subscribed to God, get rid of your slavery to these other things and become a slave to Christ. You cannot be a slave to Christ if you don't acknowledge him as the Messiah.
Right.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts of this, MTD, to call it the shorthand.
Right.
Millennials have it, Generation Z has it, and it's growing. It really, really is.
Yeah, and I think that I hope we made this point clearly as we started talking about this. The research that they were doing, this was not just looking at secular kids and how they are. They were actually doing research into kids who grew up in church, and they would ask these kids, so tell me what it means to be a Christian. And this is what the kids described as their faith. And what came out didn't actually sound much like Christianity. Yeah, so that was some of the real concerning part of this study, right? Like somehow we've been missing, in many church settings, we've been missing the mark on how do we make sure our kids are actually Christian and not just, this kind of nuanced version of faith that is more prevalent around us, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think we've just been so focused on being well behaved.
Right.
I think we really have just become overwhelmed with being well behaved. And you're missing it. Jesus wasn't always well behaved, right? He was kind of a scoundrel in a lot of ways because he did what was right according to God always, at any extent. And I think you said I think what you said was really, really good. And it's very important to focus on just recognizing Christ. So many Christians can say their faith and proclaim their faith without ever mentioning Jesus's name.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Right. Yeah, if you're going to say you're Christian and you can describe your faith without needing to invoke the name of Jesus, there's a problem with that. That's right.
Yeah, you're missing something. And so I guess just to reaffirm, moralistic therapeutic deism, if we want to talk really quickly about how to kind of counteract that, which I think is a fair question right off of that, it's just being really intentional with our words, recognizing Christ as the example in all things, vocalizing that. People will say, "Oh, thank God for that." Yeah, I think we should say that and mean it. Literally, thank you, God, for I woke up today. Thank you, God, for this. Verbally acknowledging it for anyone to hear, especially our children or our students or the people at church with us that are younger, right? Letting them hear you verbally proclaim God's presence in your life is one of the most impactful ways to counteract that.
Yeah, good. So, moving a little bit of a different direction, sure. Justin, one of the other questions I thought would be an interesting one to ask Justin, as someone who's in youth ministry, I asked you to talk about, for you, what are some ways that you would try to evaluate, the spiritual health of a teen you're working with? So if you're trying to judge whether or not your teen is going down the right path, I just said, Justin, what would be some things you would be looking for? So once again, I've created a little slide with some of his points. So Justin, do you want to talk about that some?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was a great question, by the way, Mark. You are really good at asking good questions.
Thank you.
And I guess I never, I think about it subconsciously, but I don't necessarily make out a list of, oh, well, this student did this really well today, right? But I think the first thing that is obvious to show good faith and good discipleship is biblical familiarity, right? As we just said, counteracting, moralistic therapeutic deism is, adults verbally proclaiming a God's presence in their life. And I think those adults include Isaiah, Jeremiah, Paul,
Yeah.
Peter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, right? These people are all included as well, and so listening to the voices that the Bible has provided for us. And so as when I say a text, and you can tell you can kind of tell when the light is on, right? When that makes sense to them, they know what you're talking about. And the more familiar they are with their Bibles, I mean, it's a great way for me to see, okay, you're at the very least listening in church, right? If not being discipled at home, which it is very obvious at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is asking questions. My favorite thing is being asked questions. Not that long ago, we were talking about, what is a spiritual gift that you wish you could be better at? And one of our students, she's in 7th grade, said praying. I wish I was better at praying. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And she's like, or I guess it was patience. Sorry. She was like, I wish I was more patient. I was like, that's awesome. She was like, how do I become more patient? Now that's the question.
That's a good question.
Right? That means you're wrestling with it. That means you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
That means you're interested in really engaging in this. You don't just want to answer like, oh, sure, I should be more patient.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, right? But the acknowledgement that's difficult, acknowledgement that I want to go down this path, that this is a walk worth walking, and I think that was a high moment of youth ministry for me,
yeah.
And it just shows that the kid wants to be a Christian,
right?
I think number 3 is one that it's easy to see and it's very important, is welcoming guests.
Yeah,
man. When a guest comes into your church, they are aliens from a foreign land, especially if they're unchurched.
Right.
But to step into our youth group, on a Wednesday or on a Sunday morning, you got 20 kids in there, all from 6th grade to seniors in high school. So you've got social ladders all over the place. You got cool kids, you got uncool kids, you got pretty kids, you got unpretty kids, you got 18-year-olds and you have 12-year-olds. Where do I fit in all of this, right? And you're stepping in, and if you're not going to be the first one to talk, right? What do you talk about? What's this culture like? Because this is every setting is so different, right? And so the way I can tell that a kid is interested in being good, being a good friend, being neighborly, and being missional, and being hospitable and selfless is when one of our kids is willing to, okay, I'm not going to talk to my friend for a little bit. This person that I get to see once a week, I'm going to go and make sure this person feels included. Come sit with us. You've got a place to belong. You've got people you can talk to. Why don't you sit with us for church as well? You have an invitation what you're doing for the next 2.5 hours, right? Come with me. You're fine. We got you. To make that person feel as comfortable as possible, I think is just, it's overwhelmingly important just for the sake of the group. But then secondly, it's a great measure to just see how interested in others are the students, or are we still at a place where we're only interested about ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. I love when you brought that principle out, Justin, that was one of my favorites. The idea that really part of being a missionary is what you do within the walls of the church, because it matters when someone shows up. Do people talk to them? Do people want to make them feel welcome? Or do we just say, well, I don't know them, so why would I talk to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Number 4, I would say, is personalizing their faith, which is probably the broadest thing I said. But just, ensuring their own attendance, so it's like, my parents didn't wake up on time. That's okay. I know other people that are going and I can call them, or I can be like, Dad, at least take me to class, come back and get ready and then go to church, right? Whatever it looks like. But, ensuring their own attendance, figuring out how they can minister in their own context, I think is one of the hugest things. Not everybody has the same spiritual gift. Not everybody has the same social skills. We all have different abilities, and they've all been given to us in different measures. But personalizing your faith comes from, you're doing all these things. You're engaging in the Bible. You're engaging in discipleship, and then you're saying, "Look, what can I do? Where do my skills match up? Where is the context that I'm in that could use this? Like for me, it was the football team, and I was like, well, where does this look like? And eventually, I started praying with our football coaches, and they invited me to pray over our practices. It became something that's like, well, this is something I can actively do. And I think similarly, it's just where am I at? What's going on around me, and how do I fit into that? You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And then the last one I wanted to say was just embracing the struggle. And this one is important for, I think, all of us, is that if it's okay to struggle with your faith. And it's like, I don't even want to say the word okay. It's good. It is good if you're an adolescent and you're being exposed to new ideas to be like, well, okay, that's different from what I've heard, and that would mean everything I know is false. But but I'm also an adolescent, right? There is 2,000 years of Christian faith, and that's not even counting the Old Testament, right? There's 2,000 years of Christian faith. There's however many people that go to church with me. I have my parents. I have my faith community. Let me talk to them about this thing, like whatever this is, and that's good. It is good if your student comes to you, or your child comes to you, and they have a question, and you don't know the answer. It's okay to say you don't know too, right? Like they want to get down to the bottom of this. Like, well, they say this. What do we say? I think one of the most important things, just go in there with them. Like, let's struggle through this together. Wow, that is a good point. Here's the part, but here's the answer. And if I don't have the answer, I know who does. I think that's one of the huge benefits of the church, right? And so just embracing the struggle. Like it's okay to be a little confused sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, sometimes you have to kind of let go of what's familiar in order to grasp something deeper, right? So sometimes the deeper maturity and understanding can only come to us through that period of, I'm not so sure what I think about any of this before I can find the place I need to re-engage. But yeah, there's nothing sadder to me than when someone says, well, I'm having some doubts, so I just kind of giving up. It's like, no, when you have the doubts, you have to follow, like, I always think of the story of Jacob wrestling with God, that night. And the line is, I will not let you go until you bless me. And that's the way you wrestle with God. Like, I'm going to hang on to you. I'm going to gnaw and fight and struggle. But in the end of this, I'm not going to stop until I come out somehow better because of the struggle. And that's the way to wrestle. Right.
Yeah. So just like those 5 things, if I can see that in a kid, I feel good about what's going on at home. I feel good about, where they're at. And it gives me a little life. I know how I can talk to them going forward as we continue to build on this, right? And those 5 markers are key for me.
I'm sharing a comment from this is, I think, Randall speaking through Cheryl. It is extremely important that they feel their questions will be answered, that they won't be condemned or just brushed off. And I would affirm that church should always be a place where we don't mind questions. And there should not be off-limits topics that, no, we're not going to talk about that. Because that just, I think to a younger person, anytime somebody tells me you're not allowed to talk about that, stop talking about that. What that usually means is, wow, you must realize your position is weak. It's not inspiring to see someone refuse to engage in what was my honest question. So, keeping church a place where we can have real questions and attempts to answer those questions, much like we're doing on Wednesday nights right now, I think is a healthy process for all of us. So appreciate everyone weighing in like this. So
I think and I think it also invokes fear if you're not willing to talk about it, right? And we have nothing to fear. We are Christians, ordained by God Himself. So it's okay to have a question we don't necessarily know the answer to now. That's okay.
That's right. Yeah. So, Justin, you've done a nice job kind of helping us flesh out some of the basics of this generation. We got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we keep moving. I know we got a lot of stuff we want to talk about. What would you say would be some, perhaps some common, like assumptions, or perhaps like common mistaken assumptions that people might make about trying to work with teens and young people? Like, what are some things that people might assume they shouldn't just assume?
Yeah, this is fun, right? The first point I want to say is something that's going to sound obvious, but don't polarize yourself or them. And so, like earlier, I mentioned how empathetic Generation Z is. The one thing they aren't very empathetic about is if you show a lack of empathy. And so, like an example, if a student is in high school and they are very concerned about climate change. If you just say, well, climate change isn't real. Okay. You're no longer a safe spot for me to talk to. You're no longer a person who's interested in what I'm interested in. You're just destroying that relationship. And so hear me out. It doesn't really matter in that moment how you feel about climate change, right? In that moment, what matters is how do they feel, and this relationship matters the most. I'm willing to go there with you. Tell me why you're so worried about it. Tell me what that looks like for you. What kind of emotions does that make you feel? If they are genuinely concerned for the life of the earth in 50 years, for you to brush that off would be a huge deal, right? Or the inverse is true. If you have a student who's like, I think climate change is a bunch of hogwash and you're very concerned about it, you would want them to walk with you. Like, well, hold on, let's, so I think just walking with them through that is very, very important. Belittling the cares of others is always going to terminate the relationship.
Yeah.
Always. It doesn't matter if it's Generation X to Generation Z or, American to Middle Eastern, whatever you're doing, if you're going to belittle what they care about, it's going to terminate the relationship always.
Yeah.
Well said. And I think thank you. So one of the other things I want to say is don't bring attention to what is different between you two. It's okay to acknowledge, sure, we see the world differently, but to just, if they're talking about something and you say, well, you just feel that way because you're young, or, oh, that's very Generation Z of you to say, right? Like, just avoid the stereotypes, avoid all those things. Listen, and like I think what Kathy said earlier, listen for the sake of learning. Even if you don't learn a different truth, you learned what someone else believes, and learn where they're coming from and where they're at. And so listening to learn, I think it's crucial to experience that world with them.
Yeah. And really, in a lot of ways, Justin, I think that's it's an important idea to be reminded of. But I think for people even of a much older generation, they would all probably want to affirm that, people, what's the saying? They don't know, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And I think that's consistent with this generation as well.
Right. I always do this, and if my youth kids are watching, they're probably tired of me doing this, but it's similar to when you're dating somebody, right? If you're interested in somebody, like, oh, that person is attractive to me, I want to get to know them better, I want them to be interested in me. If I went on a date with Logan, if she started talking about The Bachelor, I'm probably going to go home and YouTube some of The Bachelor so I can know how to talk to her about it, right? I'm going to go there with her. And I think it's the same when you care about anybody, care about that ministry and care about that ministry of presence.
Right.
Yeah, it's a silly analogy, but I think it makes sense.
No, it does. No, it's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah. A second one that I think is really important that I think we miss a lot of times is friends that, especially Generation Z, that they make through online gaming and online relationships are real, genuine friendships to them.
Yeah.
Even if they don't make sense to us. And I say us because they don't make sense to me. I've never once made a friend just online. Okay, I've had some guys I did fantasy football with that I thought were cool, but they're not my friends. Okay, this is different for me too. But I heard a story just the other day about a guy who his 3 out of his 5 groomsmen he met the day before his wedding.
Yeah. Because
they were all people he had gamed with for hours and hours and hours and weeks, together. And he knew so much about them. He knew the ins and outs of their life. He just had never met them in person.
Right.
And that's a real, genuine friendship. And we can't downcast that. This generation is built. They were all born and FaceTime already existed. Right. All they know is how to video chat. They're way better at this than I am.
Yeah.
Better than this that we are. And that's fine. That's a good skill that they can have. And right now it's paying dividends, right? I've never been more thankful for Generation Z than right now. Right. And so just recognizing that the way that they make friends doesn't make it less valuable, even though it's really weird to us. And I think the third one is something that we all kind of, this is going to sound obvious, but I'm going to hopefully bring a different light to it than you've heard much about, is don't let the students or let Generation Z, your friend, whatever this is, be on their phone all the time.
Yeah.
Don't let them be on electronics all the time. There's 5 love languages, right? Quality time, acts of service, gifts, and words of affirmation can all be reached through an online relationship. All those things can be done, right? I can give you a gift right now on Venmo, $20 just because I love you. Boom, 100%. That's awesome. But physical touch is lost if you're only doing it digitally.
Yeah.
And we don't think we think about that a lot. And the lack of physical touch is tied to mental illness.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's like, parents, a great question to ask yourself is whether or not your child has experienced physical touch today. Especially right now. They're at home, they're playing their games. You may eat dinner together, but have they felt your hand? Have they felt contact? And so, hug your kids, right? For the sake of their livelihood, hug your kids.
Yeah.
And once COVID is over, hug our students, please. If you're going to church, hug Generation Z, because so much is done online and at a distance these days. And so once social distancing is over, okay, I know the rules. Hug people. Let them feel physical physical touch. It is extremely important to their mental health, and just it
Yeah.
just man, I don't I want to go on for like an hour, but we were running out
Right.
of time.
Yeah.
But physical touch is overwhelmingly important,
So,
and it's being
I'm
lost.
going to share a comment really quick from
Yeah.
Sandy Richardson. She said, I think a very common assumption about teens is that they're all completely self absorbed. And I think that's, to me, that kind of ties into the point you were just talking about, Justin, how a lot of people see teens on their phone. Well, why don't they do anything with people? They're just focused on themselves and on their phone. And like for them, that is the social world. That is
Right.
them trying to engage with everyone. And
Right.
yeah, so that's helpful, Sandy. Yeah, that's I think a misrepresentation of them a lot of times, because I think all of us are selfish in our own ways. It's not that they're not
Yeah.
sometimes self-absorbed, but maybe not always in the ways that we think that they are. If I could
Right.
toss something onto the pile here, Justin, I think in
Yeah.
my own experience, something I've always been very passionate about is that I think people make a huge mistake when they try to teach teenagers like dumbed down light versions of everything. As if the only
Amen.
thing they can handle is like Christianity light. And so
Right.
not really allowing them to go deeper into the text, or some of this relates to the types of questions that they ask. But my experience was always that people kind of respond to you the way that they see that you prepare for them. So when I was teaching teens classes at Old Hickory, and they wanted to do a study of Revelation, and I said, "Are you sure? Like this is some weird, wacky stuff. If you really want that, it's going to be long and it's going to be tedious. But if you want that, I'll do it." And they said they wanted it, and so we did. We spent a long time working through the book of Revelation. But a bunch of them showed up, and they would read ahead and they would study. But I think by me showing up and being very well prepared and taking them seriously, they also took me seriously. And something I've been pleased with is that, I still hear regularly from some of the people who are in my youth group in Nashville when they have serious Bible questions, because they've always learned it was okay to do that. Like it's okay to be serious and ask real questions. And so that's another thing I would say, never underestimate a teen's willingness to go deeper. Just because they're being silly 5 minutes ago doesn't mean there isn't a deep side to them also.
Right. Yeah. Like young Jewish kids learn the whole Torah, right? We can expect our kids to be able to verbalize their faith, and to be able to dive deeper and ask those good questions.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. So Justin, I'm kind of looking over some of the notes that we had made together. We were talking about things to cover. So let's spend, we got just like 5 minutes left. So thinking about, I think it is still the case. I think all the research would still show the single biggest influence in any teen's life would be their parents, right? Yep. As parents, even if your teens act like they're mad at you or they think you're uncool, fundamentally, you still matter more to them than anyone else in their life does. Like parents are still huge in the life of their teens, but also by extension, our church family. I know some of the research has shown that one of the key factors in hanging on to the next generation is not whether there were 100 kids they were friends with in the youth group. It's actually how many friends they had in age groups that were not their own. So it's not just kind of a good thing if sometimes you as a 60-year-old are willing to talk to the teenagers. It's actually very critical to them staying true to the church that they have the ability to imagine what it looks like to be a 30-year-old Christian and a 45-year-old Christian and a 70-year-old Christian. And they can, in their head, picture what it would be like to be that age being true to the gospel because they've seen it in you. So those intergenerational friendships are so important. But talk to me a little bit about what you would see as kind of key roles of Christian adults in teens' lives.
Wow. In 5 minutes or less.
Yeah,
huh?
6 minutes, yeah.
yeah, making it really quick, I guess, and trying to be succinct, right, and brief. But words matter. Let's say this. Modeling Christian discipleship at any stage would mean being authentic with the highs and the lows, and just like it's okay to show sadness, it's okay to experience that, right? And I think just as long, man, it's hard to be short on this. But the ministry of presence is something like those authenticity and the ministry of presence are the two things I would really draw attention to. The more authentic you are with them and inviting them into your life, like that's one of the hugest things is like, going and talking to them is one thing. Invite them over with you while you go grocery shopping, right? Just like whatever it is, let them experience what it's like to look as an everyday life Christian. Let's say, how does a 40-year-old Christian experience a parking lot when someone pulls out in front of them, right? What does that look like to you? What are the words that you say? Why do you do it this way?
Yeah.
All those things are very important. And towards them not having to think of it on their own. Otherwise, there's no progression.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, one of my friends that I've known who's a little bit older than me, she always parks at the back of parking lots. And I was like, why do you do this? And she was, because I am physically fit, and you are too. And so just because they might not have a handicap sign doesn't mean they're not on crutches right now or whatever it is. And I was, man, that is so selfless to think through that way. And that's just one example of many of just thinking about parking or just parking, thinking about living a life intentionally Christian.
And, being able to share those little moments, because those are the kinds of things no one's going to talk about in Bible class. Those are the kinds of things you only get to know about a person when you've seen them up close, for a more extended period of time. That's why I'm such a big fan of things like mission trips and Bible camp. You have that extended time with people to really start to figure out kind of what makes them tick and how they respond and what they do.
Right.
Yeah. Something I was thinking about, Justin, let's see. I'm going to share this real quick from Ron. This is a good one. Ron is saying, Mark, we used to tell our daughter not to hesitate to make us the bad guys when someone is trying to get her to do something she knows is not right. I firmly believe they want their parents to say no for them. So, you're not there. That's right, Ryan. You're not really there to be your kid's best friend. You're there to be their parent. And being a good parent means setting boundaries and setting expectations and setting the example and sometimes being willing to take the fall so that they don't have to, right?
That's really good. There's a lot of implications on that. Thank you.
So one thing I wanted to talk about briefly is I was thinking about this question. Teens need to see healthy faith modeled. And on the one hand, it is a wonderful thing to at least show up to church and bring your kids with you to church. Like, I don't want to diminish that in any way. That's very important, and that's a huge thing. But if the only way your kid sees your faith at work in your life is merely by church attendance, then they could still really miss a lot. And so I was thinking about some of the Gottman Institute's research on what makes a healthy marriage. And I want to suggest that a lot of the things that are good for a marriage are also really good for you and your relationship with God. So I'm going to mention just a couple real quick as we wrap up. One would be what they call building love maps. And so if you want to strengthen your relationship with your spouse or with your child, the love map would mean I actually know well what's going on in your life. So can you answer this question about your kid right now? Like, who are their 2 or 3 closest friends? What are the things they're most concerned about? What is the thing they're most nervous about? What do they feel proud of? Just all the basic things about, what is it that makes you be you? Learning that about them, but then also letting them see you have that sort of relationship with God where you're actively interested in what's going on in God's world right now. The things that God would be caring about. What would he be paying attention to? Who are the people that God would be proud of that I'm connected to? Asking those questions. Another thing I would say is really critical in relationships, especially that your kid needs to see in your relationship with God. You don't have a healthy relationship when 2 partners don't allow each other to have influence over their lives, right? So if I don't allow my wife to influence me or she doesn't allow me to influence her, it says very bad things about our relationship. So in your relationship with God, one of the things you need to do, and Justin, you talked about being verbal in this regard, but one of the things your kid needs to hear you articulate as you relate to God is that God has influence over the way that you live and make choices. And so, hey, right now in the family, let's have a quick family talk. This is what we're up against, or here's a situation we're dealing with. Here's 2 or 3 options we have to think about. And the reason I'm leaning towards this one is because I really think this is what God would want me to do. They need to see that God has influence over you in your life. And that really helps them connect a lot of dots in what they do.
Absolutely. No, it's really well said. I love that love maps thing too. Just be interested in what God is interested in. Right? I think that's really good. I like both of those.
Good. Well, I know we're right up against the hour, so Justin,
man,
this
we
has
can
been
go
good.
Another hour easily.
And we've got several people who've been making some wonderful comments. I'm sorry, since you got two guys talking a lot tonight, so I didn't work in quite as many of your comments. I will work in this one from Jody really quick. Kids will always know if you're a phony and if you don't really like them. That's important. Do you treat your kids as if you do like them? How do you talk about them? Like when you're out in public, do you just complain about your teenagers or do you say what you like about them? would they get the
and
impression?
Facebook.
Yeah. What's that?
And on Facebook.
And on
you
Facebook.
Talk about them on Facebook matters.
Yeah.
It really does.
I was going to say, I know a lot of you love that millennial humor on Facebook, but millennials don't love that humor. We've got our own baby boomer humor. So, yeah, be thoughtful about what you say and what you post. But, yeah, being real and genuinely liking them. That's helpful, Jody. Thank you. So, Justin, we are pretty much out of time. Thank you for doing this with me. This was a lot of fun. It was a blessing to me. I hope it's been good for everyone else. Justin, I'm going to invite you, if you would, close us in a word of prayer, and we will wrap this broadcast up.
Let's do it. Father God, you are so good, and you are gracious, and you are kind, and you are Messiah. And we thank you so much for being present with all of us in our own homes or wherever we're watching. And we thank you for providing us life and providing all the stability for the entire world to rely on. And God, we thank you right now for Generation Z. Thank you for the examples that they are in so many ways. And God, we pray that you continue to lead them down a path, and may all of us be the best examples we can be. May we be willing to step into their world and into their lives authentically and without fear, God, because we know that you love them so, so much, God, and you love us so much. God, allow us just to love each other in that same way. God, we pray right now that you continue to heal the world, and please bring safety, and so we can all return to our normal, but hopefully with a new refined stance of new faith in you, God, and a better understanding of you. And God, we thank you for these things and ask you for these things in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody here.
It's awesome. Thank you all
Y'all
so much.
have a great night. I'm closing us out.
Bye.